Hello, everybody, and welcome into Betting Life's College Football Show. I am Thor Nystrom, not joined by Claudia today. She'll be back next week, but we have a lot to get to today, including the futures market, the biggest games of Week 9, player prop bets that I made this week. We'll be getting through all of it in the next 40 minutes. If you have any questions in the audience, you can type them in the chat as well. We'll get to audience questions if we have any about bets that you're thinking about making this week. Interesting week so far of college football. Last night, of course, I was watching the Vikings and the referees take that game away against the Rams. But on the side TVs, had the Syracuse-Pittsburgh game on. Incredible, speaking of implosions, incredible implosion by Kyle McCord, the 3 pick sixes in the first half against Pitt. Obviously, Syracuse didn't have much of a chance to win that game. And ODU rising up in the other game against Georgia Southern. But we'll talk about the other big games of Week 9 here in just a bit, but wanted to hit the future market first, starting with the national title odds boards. The bets right now, of course, Georgia has become the favorite here in the market at plus 330 with a bit of distance between them and Ohio State, and then Texas, Oregon, rounding that out. I still think that there's a little bit of value on Oregon at 5-1. They're sitting right now number 4 on the odds boards. From my eyes, what I've seen, they are a more complete team than Texas is at the same odds. We've already seen them beat Ohio State and Georgia. What Georgia team do we get? You know, obviously, once we get into the 12-team playoff, it's one shot and you're out. So Oregon, I think at 5-1, like I said, a little bit of meat on that bone. Other ones that I think are bettable right now, Penn State at 12-1. Now, Penn State is 5th on the odds boards right now, just right behind, I guess, Texas and Oregon, except you have the plus 700 more in the odds to bet on Penn State. Penn State, you know, we have to see it against the better competition. I've liked what I've seen so far. And as far as teams at better than 10-1 odds, I think that there's value on Penn State as well. You've seen some offensive improvements, and they had a little stagnancy right after Singleton got injured. But once that team's fully healthy again, the defense on Penn State is nasty. And the last one that I like, and this one maybe the most, Miami, you can still get Miami at 18-1. You look at the teams around them, Tennessee at 15-1, no guarantee to make the playoff. Clemson at 14-1. I like Miami quite a bit more to win the ACC and would, of course, favor them against Clemson in the ACC title game, if that was to be the title game. Miami, I understand, you know, some trepidations about them in the marketplace when you're thinking about the championship, but they have a puncher's chance against anyone because they have the best offense in the nation. And I'm not sure that it's particularly close. Certainly the best passing offense as well. So at 18-1, you know, and again, you get the buy-in in the first round, ostensibly, assuming that they do end up winning the ACC. And then you just got to win the 3 because then you're in the 8-team field from there. So just a couple national title bets to make right there. Next one, wanted to talk about the to make the college football playoff odds boards, which I typically think are this is more interesting week to week. And the odds changes, and you can find more value in this market. Looking through it, LSU at minus 115, I think is potentially worth a look. In my projections right now, I have LSU with 9.3 wins. Some of these other SEC teams, Alabama is also at minus 115. I have Alabama at 8.9 projected wins right now, for instance. And so LSU, they seem to be in the top of that sort of next tier. You have Texas and Georgia. You have a bit of a tier break there. I think LSU right around even money is worth a look. Notre Dame, you're this is the last time to buy Notre Dame in this odds market. We've talked about Notre Dame week after week after week, basically ever since they lost to Northern Illinois. You could get then Notre Dame at the juice plus odds. And each week I've been saying Notre Dame doesn't play anyone the rest of the year. So hop on now because they're going to run up the wins. I also think the development of Army and Navy being good greatly helps Notre Dame because you get to 10-2 with Notre Dame and you would still have one more loss to do this. They could still stub their toe. Even at 10-2, if you've gotten through then Army and Navy, both of them are undefeated right now. You had the big win earlier this year, Texas A&M. I think the committee is going to forgive you for being 10-2. Especially you think about the other, how many double-digit win teams are we going to get? They're not going to omit Notre Dame. So again, I still think Notre Dame has one more loss they could take during the regular season, and they would be in. This is the last time to buy them, though, assuming that you think that they're going to beat Navy this weekend as 12.5-point favorites. And we'll talk a little bit more about that game here in a bit. After that game, if Notre Dame does indeed win, they will be over -200 next week in the market, probably closer to -250. So again, at 155, that is still bettable up until Saturday, I think. Couple more. Indiana, I can't, speaking of teams that we talk about every single week in this segment, the Indiana Hoosiers, I've been talking about Indiana since they were 8-1, 5-1 to make the college football playoff. They're still plus 140. I'm pretty surprised that thing has not gotten to even money. Perhaps there is some trepidation in the market about Nathan Rourke, their starting quarterback, his injury. We'll see how long that ends up keeping him out. Seems like for sure he is going to miss this weekend's game against Washington. That's a home game, though, on College Game Day, and another game that we're going to talk about here in a bit, more in depth. But you wonder if that's some of it. But my thing with Indiana right now, my win projections on the Hoosiers, I have Indiana with 10.6 wins. I only have 3 Power 4 teams with more projected regular season wins right now than Indiana. Indiana, they can lose at least one game and almost assuredly 2 and still make the playoff, right? A double-digit win team in the Big Ten or the SEC. I've said this since the summer. I don't think that they are getting omitted. I also, as I just mentioned, do not think that a double-digit Notre Dame win team would be omitted as well. The ACC and the Big 12, those are the teams where they would be more on the cut line unless they win the title game. But Indiana, plus 140, you're probably looking at a loss at Ohio State later this fall. Outside of that, Indiana's going to be favored in every game going forward, including Michigan is another team on the schedule. We thought that would be a tough one in the preseason. It doesn't look so tough right now. And Indiana plus 140, I think that there's real value there. Just a couple more, and then we'll talk about the Heisman odds, the updated board this week. BYU at plus 220. It's a team we've talked about in recent weeks. You're getting better than 2-1 on your money on BYU. I think that is worth a bet. The projected wins that I have, you have Kansas State. Kansas State, I have at 10 flat wins. BYU 10.3 in the Big 12. Iowa State, I have at 10.5. But we talked about Iowa State in recent weeks when their odds were more juiced. That's when you should have bought that ticket. Iowa State now is minus 135 in the odds boards. With these bets and the futures bets, nobody's omniscient, right? I mean, like, I don't have Biff Tannen's Sports Almanac guide. With this, it's about investing, right? And when you're looking for the opportunities where you can get the plus money on the teams, where once the playoff committee announces the field, it is almost impossible statistically for you to lose money if you've diversified your portfolio with those value investments at the right time. I think BYU is still bettable at plus 220. It looks like a 3 horse race right now for the Big 12. Other teams like Colorado might quibble with that just a little bit, but that's how I'm seeing it. And BYU, even though we'll be talking about BYU in a bit, I'm a bit trepidation about BYU this week. So, I mean, potentially, if you agree with me on that, you could potentially bet them next week. But either way, they're going to be in the mix for that Big 12 title. So a team to consider, can keep an eye on. SMU at plus 250. SMU was my darling in the summer. They did not look great at the outset of the season. They suffered the loss, which looked bad at the time. It occurred to a team called BYU. That loss has gotten, starting to look a lot better in hindsight. And SMU, they made the quarterback change going from Preston Stone to Kevin Jennings. Ever since then, their offense is getting better. And they're looking like the team that we thought we were going to see in the preseason. SMU at plus 250. And you look at the rest of SMU's schedule, they had the great fortune in their first year in the ACC of ducking both Miami and Clemson. And perhaps the great fortune of getting Florida State on that schedule as well. SMU, they're another team that my model has liked throughout. The win projections on them right now, 10.2. You have Miami ahead of them in the pecking order, and then SMU is right with Clemson right there after sort of a tier break in the SEC, or I'm sorry, the ACC. And that's a conference I think that potentially we'll see could get the second team in as the wild card. SMU, if they can get into second in that pecking order, certainly they would get the nod there. So plus 250, I think there's value on that. Lastly, UNLV playing a pivotal game at home, hosting Boise State on Friday night. You can get UNLV right now 6-1. UNLV is only a 3-point underdog at home against Boise State. I realize Boise State has looked like world beaters. I realize that Ashton Jeanty has looked, like Barry Sanders crossed with Alvin Kamara and Derrick Henry. But UNLV, I mean, the market is just telling you this. If you don't already believe it, they will have a shot in that game. And if they can pull what would be a minor upset and beat Boise State, they all of a sudden would move into pole position for that G5 spot. UNLV only has one loss right now. It was a close game. You knock off Boise State, you're going to flip-flop with them. Boise State right now is minus 110. Right. We've seen these G5 teams start to eliminate each other. Navy has their first really hard game this week against Notre Dame. Army's got to face Notre Dame afterwards. UNLV would put themselves in a great position if they did indeed pull that upset. So 6-1, if you think UNLV can, absolutely is worth the bet. You have to bet that in addition to UNLV this week if you are betting on UNLV. Lastly, before we get into some of the big games this week, wanted to just really quickly hit the Heisman. Cam Ward is, a guy last couple of weeks we've been advocating for bets on as he fell out of the leader in the pole position for this thing, down the odds boards just a little bit. I still think Cam Ward is bettable at plus 240 right now for the Heisman. He is the guy that will most cleanly fit the definition of what we understand to be a Heisman winner based on what the voting block has told us for the last 15 to 20 years. You have it all there. He is the national leader in passing yards. It's not close by like 150 yards right now. The passing touchdowns are all there. The efficiency numbers are there. The offense as a whole is there. You also have the story, which the voting block likes as well. Going from Washington State, he actually literally did declare for the NFL draft. Pulled out before the deadline, was talked into going to Miami, and the rest was history there. Has completely turned around that program and turned around the fate of Mario Cristobal, who coming into this season was on, I don't know if I'd say a hot seat, but it was starting to get a little bit, it was like a sauna seat. It was starting to get a little bit warmer on him. Cam Ward and the Miami Hurricanes are dominating right now, and Cam Ward at the plus 220. Playoff team quarterback with the best stats, it's Cam Ward. So he's worth a look. And then I mentioned a couple of weeks ago when there was the Travis Hunter fury of everyone go out and bet Travis Hunter, and he had was him and Jeanty there for a couple of weeks at the very top. Hunter, he suffered the shoulder injury, and then in two different games he was limited. They say now that he is getting closer to 100%. Hunter, Deion Sanders says that he will play this weekend. His odds now have dropped to 18-1 in the market. Travis Hunter, as I mentioned the last couple of weeks, was not bettable at plus 250, plus 300, plus 350. If you want to get involved with Travis Hunter, now's your time to do it at 18-1. If he plays out the rest of the season, he's going to have to. He can't get injured again. If he plays out the rest of the season, and Colorado, let's say they get to the Big 12 title game, certainly if they got into the playoff, that is where Travis Hunter becomes beyond live. But even if they, let's say they get to 9 wins, you're going to have to get to a certain threshold there as a team. And then in addition, obviously him continuing to play well, but he's got the story on his side as well. A nod back to Charles Woodson, and in Hunter's case, a true two-way player who we have already seen him flip multiple games this year. 18-1, that's where that becomes bettable. Look into his health status a little bit more, but that at least that's what they're telling us. And the last one I wanted to shine a light on, deeper down the board even, is Garrett Nussmeier at 25-1 right now. LSU is coming on. That offense looks really good. I mentioned in the To Make the College Football Playoff segment that my system likes LSU right now to sneak in as one of those wild card teams. If they do that and Nussmeier keeps playing like this, and I see Nussmeier getting better. Keep in mind, this is his first season as a full-time starter, and they had replaced essentially their entire receiver core after Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas went out the door over the offseason. The continuity now is they're becoming more comfortable with each other. They're sorting out the sort of that pecking order in the receiver room. Mason Taylor has been tremendous as the tight end there. They've also figured out the running back room, which is a problem in the first couple weeks. They have a good receiving back in that Durham kid. So Nussmeier, the LSU offense, it's going to be there to facilitate the numbers for him. And if they can crash the party as one of the wild card teams, LSU, I think he finds himself in New York. So he might be the value bet on the board right now at 25-1. Let's get into the big games on Saturday. I'm just going to give you, a brief sort of treetop looks at these games, handicaps, and if I made any bets on them, including player props, I will mention those as well. On Saturday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern on the Betting Life and Fantasy Life channels, and also streaming live on X, we do our live pregame betting college football show on Betting Life and Fantasy Life with myself, Eric Froton, and Gene Clemens, where we will get way deeper into these games. But we'll just give you a little appetizer here. Let's start out. I was talking about Navy and Notre Dame before, so let's start out with that one. We have my system's line in this game is Notre Dame minus 12, which is right around where it is in the market right now. Let me see what live if we have, well, it's actually ticked up a little bit to 13.5 right now as the consensus. Interesting line movement here as we get later into the week, especially at 13.5. And I realize I guess I'd be disagreeing with my system here. I like, or no, I guess at this point I wouldn't be. I like Navy in that I would take the points there. Notre Dame, they don't have do they have an offense that we trust? In addition to that, who has Notre Dame played outside of the one team? Ever since then, that initial big win they had early in the season, by far the best team that they have played is Louisville. They won that game by a touchdown, and they were soundly outgained in it. That's the best. And Notre Dame's played a bunch of trash opponents in between, outside of that Louisville team. Navy, now, of course, they play trash opponents as well. I hear you. But a team like Notre Dame has not seen a team like Navy yet. You can see it on film, what they do, the new offenses that both Army and Navy run. I think it's another thing to see it on the field. Those teams now, it's not, of course, the traditional triple option out of the flex bone. More shotgun. You have more options with the run game, getting the ball to the outside. And then both those teams where the offenses have really jumped up is both of them now have legitimate passing threats as well, where you have to respect their deep game. You can't just pack the box. If you're going to give me 13.5 points, I even see a stray 14 out there in the market right now. I'm taking the points with Navy. And, again, this doesn't go back to like the NIU game, but with Notre Dame, but I think that does underscore Notre Dame has issue creating margin with the teams that are not as talented as them. I think a fair criticism of some of the Marcus Freeman teams at times over his tenure is they played up to some teams. They've also dragged some teams up to their level, and you turn games into these coin flips. And there's been some criticism of Marcus Freeman's decisions late in those games. In this one, I would take the 13.5. The next one, College Game Day, goes to Bloomington, Indiana for only the second time in its history. Interesting circumstances here with Indiana losing their starting quarterback, Rourke, in advance of this one. Rourke looks like he'll be out for 1 to 2 games. Again, we'll see. It's a throwing thumb thing. He underwent a procedure earlier this week. It's going to come down to a pain tolerance thing. You think about your thumb. It's the only digit on the bottom side of the ball. You can't numb it in advance of a game because then you can't feel that ball, which would be, of course, deleterious to your performance on the field. So it becomes a pain tolerance thing. We'll see with Rourke. In this game, Taven Jackson steps in for Indiana against Washington here. Taven Jackson, former 4-star recruit for Josh Heupel at Tennessee. He was a top 200 overall recruit. A guy who has always had the throwing talent, and he has a dual threat element to his game. He is a better runner, certainly, than Rourke, far more athletic than Rourke. Rourke was okay, waiting it out, going across the progression, knowing like, oh, there's a lane right in front of me. And he could do the thing of stealing the little thing there. He had good vision as far as that goes, but not very athletic. Taven Jackson gives you more athleticism. And I think in this matchup, that's ironically advantageous for Indiana, because Washington has one of the best pass defenses in the nation. You're asking for trouble if you're throwing too often into that Washington secondary, especially in neutral game scripts. Some teams can't help themselves. They fall behind. But where Washington struggles, and this has been a recurring issue the last couple of years, it's their run defense. So you put in now, Indiana does, the better runner behind center, and Indiana goes 4 deep in the running back room. There's been a lot of ink about Curtis Rourke this year, and deservedly so, with Indiana and their resurgence, and of course with Kirk Cignetti. But the defense has also gotten way better on Indiana, and the running game has as well. There's a lot of unsung heroes that haven't gotten as much ink. The running back room there for Indiana, I expect them to feast in this game. And the quarterback Jackson as well. Limited action. We saw him last week, the second half of the Nebraska game. Indiana outscored Nebraska in that 28-0. And they were running their full offense for most of that, or at least a variation of it for Jackson, because I think the coaching staff knew it was like a halftime thing. I think they knew not only is Rourke out for the second half, we're gonna have to play at least one game without him. So let's get Jackson, some game experience, etc. Defense played great for Indiana in that game against Nebraska, and you saw what Jackson could do as well. He went 7 for 8 in that game, led the 4 touchdown drives, had 2 touchdowns himself. So for Indiana, I think it's maybe a little bit better matchup maybe than it appears on the surface. If you can get beneath a touchdown there, that's where I would buy on the Hoosiers. And right now in the market, we're still at the 6.5 that I got on Sunday. I still, of course, think that's bettable. And I had a couple other bets in that game. I was mentioning the advantage that the Indiana run game is going to have against Washington in this one. And keep in mind, Washington, you're traveling multiple time zones over to the east in this game for a noon Eastern kickoff. That's going to be, I think it's 9 a.m. body clock time of the Washington defenders in this case. The running game for Indiana, Justice Ellison, I got him at 56.5, the over, the 1A back in Indiana's committee. I think he's going to jump over that one. And then perhaps even better value, Tyson Lawton, the sort of 1B guy there, is 40.5. Now, this to follow me on that one, you have to think that Indiana's going to win. Obviously, I think Indiana's going to win, so the game script doesn't flip the other way. That's where Indiana would become in trouble if Washington can pull out to the 10-point lead at halftime, and then Indiana's got to throw more in the second half. Then you're going into the wood chipper against Washington's pass defense. But as long as you can start quickly, and Indiana has in every single game this year, they've been blowing teams out in the first quarter. In the second quarter, they always stake out to the big lead at halftime. Assuming that they can get that lead at halftime, you have that game script, which I expect in the neutral game script to lean toward more towards the run than the typical Indiana one, just because of the circumstance with the quarterback, also knowing the tendencies of the defense. And then once the game script starts to go the other way after halftime, you're going to see more run. I think you're getting pretty good value on both those teams. The rushing offense for Indiana, number 3 in success rate in the nation, number 19 in EPA per rush. It's legit. Justice Ellison to this point averaging 73.4 yards per game rushing on 7 yards per carry. Pretty good. And Tyson Lawton averaging 56.1 yards per game rushing on 5.2 yards per carry. So both those guys, they've been going over that number, and this game you're not facing a good run defense. So Indiana and those two props there. The next game I wanted to hit, Illinois and Oregon. My line on this game, my systems line, is Oregon minus 19.9. Number in the market right now, like looking across the board, I'm seeing a 21. I'm seeing a 21.5. A couple of 21s and a half. I'm seeing 22 on Oregon. So that's sort of where we're sitting. I guess this is a tough one because you're right on the margins. I mean, for me, this is not bettable because it just becomes this Oregon. Do we see the type of Oregon team that we saw against Ohio State? Are they ready to drop the hammer on someone? Illinois, they're not Purdue. You're going to have to come out firing on all cylinders here to beat that team by more than 20. Illinois, they've impressed me this year. They don't blow your socks off with their talent, but they don't make mistakes. And they're like it was like Teddy KGB said of Mikey McD and Rounders, that alligator blood. They just keep hanging around in these games against some better opponents, and they don't shoot themselves in the foot. For instance, like a team like Michigan did against them to allow them to win. Oregon, do they have everything buttoned up like we've seen the last couple of weeks, or does it look more like the early season Oregon where they made unforced errors? That's what I mean. Like, the handicap doesn't need to get more complicated than that. I think that's what it is. We see the Oregon the last couple of weeks. Yeah, they're probably going to win by more than 3 touchdowns. But any sort of blips there or regressions to what we saw in September, Illinois is going to keep this one closer than people think in that case. But yeah, a stay away from me. I definitely think that there's better value on the board. Next game I wanted to hit, going now later into Saturday, was we'll start out with Missouri and Alabama. The live line on this one, we got Alabama minus 17.5. I'm seeing some 18s out there as well in the marketplace. Speaking of what team are we going to get, both these teams have been super weird this year, as you guys know. Alabama, ever since that first half against Georgia, obviously we've been disappointed with their performances, and Missouri, their entire season's been a disappointment. Right? Like the first, in September there, when they were playing one of the easier schedules of any Power 4 opponent, they kept getting by against these just awful opponents. But once Missouri started playing anyone, we saw some of the issues that confused us in September start to crop their ugly head even more. For instance, why aren't they giving the ball to Luther Burden? Or why has this offense regressed to this level? Brady Cook at least looked competent last year, is not looking competent anymore. Sometimes the ancillary receivers, they would disappear as well. The running game has obviously regressed. You go from Cody Schrader to the our Christmas duo there, Marcus Carroll and Nate Noel. But it shouldn't have dropped off that much. It has been sort of a shocking regression there. And obviously that's why myself and others in the market are trepidatious about the idea that Missouri could end up rallying into bowl season. I don't trust this Missouri team at all. And I understand if you don't trust Alabama and don't want to lay it here. I certainly would not be able to take the points based on what I have seen from Missouri's offense to this point. Alabama, their defense, I think they're going to be able to shut off the lights on that offense. And Milroe and crew should be able to manufacture enough points to keep this one comfortable. This one's more a feel one for me than anything. That's why that's my lean. Don't like what I've seen of Missouri whatsoever so far this season. So for me, that one would be a lay it or stay away type game. I just have to see it for Missouri one game. We have to see an offensive plan at some point. Like, not asking for a lot. We need to see some cohesion. Get Luther Burden involved. Start moving those chains. I don't know what else to say. Don't like Missouri. I think that there's a real shot that Missouri gets slaughtered on Saturday by the Crimson Tide. To our next one, another game in the SEC, Texas A&M taking on LSU. My line on that game is A&M minus 1.6 points. I took LSU plus 3.5 on Sunday. We talked about LSU already a bit on today's episode. I'm starting to, the Tigers are starting to grow on me. I caught the USC game just like the rest of you on that opening Monday night. I wasn't as impressed with LSU. They were still trying to figure out that receiving core. It was Nussmeier's first game since taking over the starting job from Jaden Daniels. the running back room, they, sorting through that as well as the receiver room. John Emery came in at the end of that game and looked like the best running back LSU had. He immediately once again got injured for the season. But LSU in the week since then, they've figured out the skill stuff, which Brian Kelly and crew typically do. Nussmeier is coming on quickly. I'll be not only we talk about him on the Heisman board today, we'll also be talking about him when I put together my NFL draft top fives here in a couple weeks, because he will be in my top five quarterback prospects, Garrett Nussmeier. But against Texas A&M here, I think LSU brings a lot of firepower to this thing, and I think A&M's pass defense is going to struggle to completely tamper down that LSU passing offense. I see this thing as a straight coin flip. And so getting those 3.5 points, getting the 3 in the hook, happy to take that. LSU, last year they had the number 2 SP plus offense. It has only fallen to number 3 this year, which is actually pretty stunning. Only fallen off 1 so far. But you've seen big improvement with LSU's defense, 52 last year, now 32. And special teams, they go from 82 to 25 there, have more than offset any small drop that we've seen on their offense. I like that team, and absolutely they have a shot to go into College Station and pull this upset. But either way, like I said, coin flip game here. If you're going to give me 3.5 points on one of the sides, I'm definitely going to take that. The next game is that I want to talk about, another one in the SEC. Going to Texas and Vandy. Speaking of fascinating games here, Texas let us down last week, against Georgia. Obviously not a very good showing there. And they traveled to Vandy, a team that has taken to ambushing opponents this year. Vandy has not been taken seriously to this point, and they've made teams pay for that. Texas, now you go in there, a bit of a deflate spot, and you go into this Vandy team that is suddenly live and can manufacture yards. We saw Georgia run the ball a lot easier than I thought they were going to be able to. Georgia doesn't have a great rushing offense. We hadn't seen them run the ball like that yet thus far to that point in the season that they did against Texas. And Texas, we had talked in the week leading up to that about how you lose Tavondre Sweat, you lose Murphy next to him, both top 40 picks in the NFL draft in the spring. Texas's run defense, which last year was the best in the nation, it had clearly regressed. It might have regressed even more than we thought heading into that game. Vandy, they're just going to mercilessly try to paper cut that thing, right? With both Pavia, of course, the running backs as well. And then, you get them into they're just trying to get into third and short, essentially, where they can give you the option of either the running play. You don't know where, it's hide the ball in the cup with that, or are we going to do a play action, a quick, little hitter there? They did a bunch of those against Alabama to move the chains on third down. That's how you can, if you're not going at the teeth of the strength of that Texas defense, which is the pass defense, that's where you can move the ball on Texas. I think Vandy profiles as a team that can do that. And I don't think you can underscore Texas here, traveling out to Nashville in this deflate spot as well. Texas, not the world beaters that we thought. If you're going to give me, 16, 17 points there with the home team in Vandy, a team that I think matches up decently well, I'm certainly going to take that with America's team, the Commodores. Next game, Miami and Florida State. I thought this line was funny. I saw it like when it dropped this week. I was at the Vikings game last week against the Lions, tailgating in advance of that, and I saw a tweet, pulled up on the notifications about this line had dropped. I think it was 19.5 when it first dropped, and I made the joke on Twitter, is that a first quarter line for Miami there? By the time I got back home and was able to bet it, it was Miami minus 20.5. My system spread on that game is Miami minus 23.6. I think that line should be above 24. I do. And I think we're going to see a mauling here. Right now, consensus in the market is 21. I don't know what else to say. We talk about Florida State on this show almost every single week because they've been a piggy bank for us to fade all season long. I mean, it was apparent right from the get, their very first game in week 0, that team was a bit dead on arrival, both in terms of the key players they had acquired in the transfer portal. to take over for guys that had left for the NFL, and also just the bizarre offensive system that they were trying to use, funnel everything through DJU. It's gotten even worse since then. The defense continues to regress. DJU is out. And we found out why they wouldn't bench him early on when he was struggling in September, because Brock Glenn is decidedly worse. Brock Glenn completing 4% less of his passes, averaging 1 yard less per dropback, takes more sacks per pressure than DJU did. You don't have a run game there for Florida State. They're out Roydell Williams. They're out Jalen Lucas. Both those transfers, they're injured. You're down to Lawrence Toafili, and then the true freshman there as well. Bad offensive line play. You don't have any receiver talent, and your defense stinks. Outside of that, how is the play, Mrs. Lincoln? And then meanwhile, with Miami, mentioned it before, best offense in the nation. And you also have in this instance here, an opportunity where not only is your stadium going to be packed, Miami, they only pack the stadium when it matters to the locals, when it's a big deal. This is a big deal. Get the opportunity to have a ritual here against a down Florida State arch rival. Miami has every incentive to run the score up here. You start thinking about the 12-team playoff and the selection for that. I think that's what we're going to see here. Florida State's pass defense ranks 111th EPA per pass. It's bad. Florida State has a bad pass defense, and there is no better passing offense again in the nation than Miami's. Definitely going Miami there, laying those points with the Hurricanes. I think they get the dominant win there. Now we're gonna hit the player props section of the show. I got a few here that I wanted to hit on games that we hadn't discussed yet. A Friday nighter where I think that the props come into play. I don't have a play on this game officially on the side, but I do like a couple of the props in it. The USC Rutgers game in Los Angeles on Friday evening, they dropped USC quarterback Miller Moss, his line way too high, his passing line. It was dropped at 307.5, which we hopped on immediately. That was a bit of a stunning line for a couple different reasons. USC, first off, is favored by 2 touchdowns in this game at home against the opponent that's traveling across the country. The game script could flip pretty early against Miller Moss, getting the amount of attempts that it would even require to go over a number like that. And then the other thing is, you look at the Rutgers defense. Rutgers run defense is horrific, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a second. Their pass defense is significantly better. Rutgers is. So if you're Lincoln Riley and you're in the lab looking over this game, you're going to do, especially as the 2 touchdown favorite, you're going to do the path of least resistance, which is both the more viable option. It also projects to be the more prosperous one. The pass defense for Rutgers, 36th in EPA per dropback. Number 3 in first downs per completion, etc. Whereas the run so we're going under the 307.5 with Miller Moss. The run defense, meanwhile, for Rutgers, this is where it gets good. So Rutgers run defense, rushing success rate, 121st. Yards per rush when you omit sacks, 117th. EPA per rush, 124th for Rutgers. Woody Marks for USC, running back there, is going to go wild in this game. You can have your way with Rutgers on the ground. And again, path of least resistance for USC here. I think you see run. I think you're going to see way less attempts for Miller Moss than you typically do. And I think Woody Marks hops over his rushing yardage number here pretty easily. I got it at 94.5. I saw that in the days since that has jumped up into the high 90s. Still going over. Like I said, he's going to get in the triple digits in this game. Everything sets up pretty well for it. Got a couple more that we wanted to hit here. If anyone has any questions in the chat, you can certainly hit us up on those. I'll get to those in 1 second. So keep typing your questions down there. But just a couple others I want to hit really quick. I'm going under Travis Hunter, 91.5 receiving yards against Cincinnati. Travis Hunter, he got nicked up 2 weeks ago with the shoulder injury. Last week, They were optimistic about his status. He made it through one half, and he wasn't even playing every snap in that one half. Now, Deion Sanders, and I mentioned this earlier in the show, says that Travis Hunter is now feeling way, way better. And in this game, they aren't foreseeing the limitations that we saw last week. You got to prove it to me now. We made money last week by fading Travis Hunter in sort of that the uncertainty with his injury situation. Obviously, keep in mind, this is a guy that has to play both ways. So, and he's also a guy that is a potential top 3 pick in April. So you can't play him on the injured shoulder if he is. If it's like a 90% thing, but it's not in increased risk of reoccurrence, you have to watch the situational stuff. You have to use them with a bit more discretion. That might involve a bit less snaps on offense. And Shadir Sanders has been developing pretty good rapport with the other receivers there. Will Shepard, an example of a transfer receiver that's been coming on there. So I think that's one to look at as well. With Travis Hunter potentially fading him if you share the same trepidation that I do, something that we also saw last week there. Okay, let's hit a couple questions. Let's see what we got here. We got a question about UNLV and the making the playoffs future. I do think that the 6-1 on UNLV is absolutely bettable right now. You want to do that before Friday evening when they play Boise State, if you think they have a shot to win. But if UNLV pulls off that minor upset, 3-point home underdog, 3-point home underdog, their odds are going to be more than slash in half. They'll be, perhaps even slash in a third, to more like 2-1. So yeah, I think that there's absolutely there's implied value, if nothing else, by what we're seeing on the board. Chris Howard asked us, he said, why is BYU plus 2.5 trap line? And then he asked, does Diego Pavia have any chance of another massive upset this week? I do like Vanderbilt with the points in that one against Texas. As far as the outright upset, we'll see. We'll see. Texas's run defense has proved leaky. So we'll see. But Vanderbilt, I think by definition, is live. They've already beaten a team right around that quality. As far as BYU in that game, Chris is asking us if that is a trap line. I'm not sure if I would put it that way, but I'm on the opponent in that game, and I'm sure some of my brethren in the out there in the sports betting market are as well. That might explain why it's on the surface maybe it looks a little bit fishy. BYU traveling to UCF in this game. I got UCF +2. I'm also on the UCF money line a little bit better than even money. My system's line in that game is UCF -1, but there's more reasons why I'm back in UCF in that game. First off, you have BYU, who has gotten, let's just say it, they've gotten lucky in a couple of these games. They're now traveling all the way across the country. This is one of the longest road trips of this week to go and play this UCF team in the bounce house. The way that you can have your way with UCF, it's very simple. It's binary. It's one thing. If you can stop the run. If you cannot stop the run, they will have their way with you. It's binary. It's very, very simple. And then on the other side, if you can throw the ball as well, because UCF, their run defense is really good. They're going to shut out the lights on your run game almost assuredly. You have to be able to throw on them. In this game here, BYU, it's their pass defense that's good. BYU's run defense has been sort of an understated issue throughout. It's been a good start, so it hasn't become like a talking point to this point. I think it becomes a talking point in this game. I think UCF is going to have a ton of success on the ground. Ja'Cory Brown, the quarterback that took over for KJ Jefferson, ran wild last week. And obviously, RJ Harvey's been running wild all year. I think that continues here. And if BYU cannot force UCF to throw, they are in deep, deep trouble. BYU needs to get a lead early in that game. They get behind, and they have the one-handed offense where they have, even though it's a bad UCF pass defense, they can make you one-handed. They know what's coming. You have a shot to flip the field on Retzlaff as well. And it could just become an avalanche as well. So that's the way I go there. Then the Jefferson asked us about the MAC title. I got to get to the Friday games before in the few minutes we have left. I'll hit the conference futures early next week on the Monday show with Claudia. So we'll hit that then. The MAC is a pretty fascinating one. We'll get in depth with them. But wanted to hit really quick since we're running out of time. The couple Friday games that we have this week. Louisville and BYU. My line on that game is Louisville minus 6.3 points. I don't love the Cardinals this year. From what I've seen, the one last year I thought was a little bit more sound. I think Louisville, it's sort of the profile of a team that's begging to get upset. Boston College, they can do some stuff with that running game. There's efficiency with the pass game as well. I would take the points in that one. That's how I'd lean in that game. Right now, the live line we have there, 7.5, especially getting that hook over the touchdown. I would lean towards BC. And then the last one here, Boise and UNLV, the aforementioned game. Mentioned this a little bit before. Right now in the market, we got a uniform consensus here of 3.5. Boise State by 3.5. My system's line on that game is Boise State -3. I would lean towards UNLV. Again, like I mentioned before, Boise State, that you've seen so many blowout wins, you're getting accustomed to it now. Ever since the Oregon game, and of course they kept that game within 3, which in hindsight looks even better. But ever since then, it's been blowout of Portland State. Washington State was the one that was impressive. That was by 3 touchdowns. But Utah State and Hawaii the last couple of weeks beat Hawaii by 21 points. That's a bad opponent. This game, you go into UNLV, one of the bigger regular season games of how long there at that program. You're in this primetime spot here. And the thing that hasn't been talked about enough, I think, as far as Boise State goes, because it's been Gene T mania over there. Their defense has some real holes, and this UNLV offense is good. UNLV's offense, number 21 SP plus. They run at the hyper tempo, the go offense that they play with Brendan Marion. Boise State has a leaky defense as is. I think that they're going to get gouged there. Just like Gene T, of course, is going to get his yards. I was set at over 190 in the market this week. I don't know if I'd be going over that number against UNLV, but something to take a look at. But UNLV also number 2 special teams, sort of sneakily. If we have a close game, could steal points there. But the run defense for UNLV, it's not a sieve. Number 24 EPA per rush. And yeah, sure, you could quibble with the strength of schedule there, but they have played Houston. I'm talking about UNLV. They played Houston, Kansas, Fresno State, Syracuse, Oregon State. So, I mean, at this point, we have enough of a data set there for UNLV. I think UNLV keeps that thing a little bit closer. And of course, I think they have a puncher's chance there of pulling the upset. It's why we talked about with the futures market. I think they're worth a look at the 6-1, because if they can pull this upset, and it wouldn't be a big upset, you're going to see UNLV essentially flipping spots with Boise State next week. Now, it wouldn't be over yet, right? I mean, you would still have the oncoming matchup in the MWC title game, that you would have to think about as well. In addition to Army, Navy, can one of those teams upset Notre Dame? Certainly, if one of those teams got through undefeated, there's different factors at play there. But UNLV would be my lean on the side, and UNLV at the 6-1 in those future market. That's all we got time for today, guys. Check us out on Saturday, 10 a.m. Eastern, for the live pregame show on Betting Life. For Thor Nystrom, we'll see you next time with Claudia.